voice of the UK.
The voice of the UK.
The voice of the UK.
The number of children who need help with their speech and language has risen, particularly for those who began school after the first lockdown. The BBC's Shared Data Unit found there were 10% more children in their first year in England who need extra help. And in some local authorities, that figure rises to 35%. NHS waiting lists are at their highest ever for speech and language therapists, with some families waiting more than a year. Kat Allison's 3-year-old son Seamus is one of those who's been on the waiting list.
We had an idea that things weren't developing right quite early on. So he turned 1 in 2020. And at that point, he hadn't started talking. So we had our suspicions that something just wasn't clicking for him. But it took another year until he turned 2 that he actually got put on the speech therapy waiting list.
So he's only on the waiting list now. How close is he to actually getting some treatment?
We don't know. When we first went on it, they said it'd be a few months and that the waiting lists were quite long. We're now coming up a year and he's still not had that NHS assessment or anything else.
Blimey. So a year to get on the list and now a year on the list waiting for any kind of initial assessment. Now, do you think that lockdown specifically has anything to do with his speech development issues, or do you think there are other things at play here?
So although we can't get a diagnosis until he's seen by a speech therapist, we know that Seamus is autistic.
Right.
We can't say that lockdown would have caused this, but it certainly hasn't helped. They say early intervention can make such a big difference with helping children who are non-verbal. And the time that he's been waiting, we could have been, he could have been getting somewhere. He could have been seen by somebody. They could have had techniques to help him. So.
Well, this is it. I really feel for you because it's such a crucial period in a child's life for development, isn't it? So it's really, time is of the essence. Have you been looking for help and support from anywhere else at all? Is there anywhere else you can access?
We've been really lucky to have the help of Portage, which is a council-run service that uses play therapy to connect with the children. And our Portage worker has introduced Seamus to Makaton, so he uses sign language. And because he took to that so well, we've been able to work with him to add more and more signs, and he can now communicate really well.
Yeah.
But he still isn't talking. And to move him to the next level, we really do think needs that speech therapy input that we're waiting for.
Yeah. Are you sitting there on your knee, very intently, I guess, looking at the FaceTime that we're talking on now? And there's a lot of sort of touch and visual communication between the two of you. How does it affect your relationship with him?
I mean, at first, for the first year, while we were waiting for somebody to take us seriously, he was very frustrated. He was a very angry child. He really struggled to control his emotions because he wanted to talk to us and he couldn't. So having the sign language has unlocked that, and it's made the last year a lot easier. But we worry that because he uses sign language, he's going to struggle by the time he gets to preschool because you'd have to understand sign language to understand Seamus.
Have you any idea when you might finally get an appointment? Have they given you any indication?
The last update that I managed to get out of the doctor said it'd be about 8 months, and now we've gone past that again. So I think it could be quite a long time that we're waiting. And there'll be so many other kids out there who are in the same boat, and the NHS is doing everything it can, and everyone that we have seen and dealt with has been wonderful. But this wait for speech therapy has really held everything up for us.
Now, the government says it's investing £180 million in early years development and that thousands of early years professionals will benefit from more training.
The voice of the UK.
The voice of the UK.
The voice of the UK.